These are the top 5 strongest hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel that you really want to own if you want to stop some of these crazy combo decks we've been seeing dominating ranked. If you feel like all of these best decks just keep on comboing before you get to play the game, hand traps are actually the ultimate tool to stop that from happening. A hand trap is essentially a card that you can use from your hand instantly in order to stop a play from happening. Over the past 2 weeks, we've been seeing the meta completely shift and evolve. And this is also why I didn't want to make this video from day one. It was perfectly possible that on day one, certain decks were considered the best, and then over time the meta evolves, because obviously this meta was a bit different from OCG and also very different from TCG, and then that video would be completely wrong, you know, within 2 weeks. And this is also what happened. On day one, we saw people going crazy over Sky Striker, Zodiac, Shadow, and while these decks are definitely still strong, now people are on stuff like Tri-Brigade Lyrilusk, Drytron, Eldritch. So these 5 hand traps that I'll be going over should help you in these particular matchups. Now this doesn't mean that you need to play all 5. Most decks don't have room for all 5. So you do have to pick and choose a little bit depending on what you're facing and also depending on which deck you are playing. Not every deck has a lot of room for hand traps. With that being said, most decks should probably run anywhere between 5 and 9 hand traps depending on the meta and the amount of room they have. Before we get into that though, most long-time viewers know that I'm no real YouTuber. I never considered myself a real YouTuber. I don't do the "oh" face on the thumbnail. I don't scream in my videos. But finally, I graduate into a real YouTuber, because this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. You've probably seen Raid Shadow Legends everywhere by now, and for good reason. With over 48 million downloads so far, Raid is one of the top mobile games available right now. There are millions of champion combinations available to be used in both PvP arenas or PvE like raid bosses, dungeon runs, and campaign battles. When I first booted up the game, I was honestly impressed by the graphics. It's very rare that a mobile game can have this level of detail in both its characters and its animations. There are a lot of champion options, but one I particularly love is Abyss. Look at that crown. Yas, queen. She's also super powerful at PvP, and if you know me, PvP is my #1 goal in any game. Taking into account my edgelord side, I couldn't pass up on Sissia Flametongue either. Look how huge she is compared to the others. In terms of playstyle, she uses burn, so if you're a nurse burn player, this might be for you. Because of her AoE attacks and other options, she's once again amazing for arena, but also the Doom Tower and dungeons like the Spider Den. Raid's got a ton happening this month, with a fresh rotation of the brutal Hydra boss and a ton of events and tournaments every single day, including special Valentine's Day events, ooh la la, where you can get your hands on a brand new legendary champion. My girlfriend's actually gonna be gone for 3 months, including on Valentine's Day, but luckily I have Sissia to keep me warm during these lonely days. This is the best time to get started in Raid, and if you click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen, you'll get free resources and a free mystery champion straight away to kickstart your game. I'm not telling you who it is, but trust me, they're awesome. Hit my link and see who you'll get. Now let's get into these hand traps. On number 5, we have Artifact Lancia. Now Artifact Lancia isn't the most obvious hand trap. When people think of hand traps, there's a few other ones they usually think of first, but Lancia is actually incredible depending on what a meta looks like. So some metas, Lancia will be awful. You won't even use it. But in other metas, it will be the difference between winning and losing a lot of your games. It stops Tri-Brigade from banishing. It stops PK from banishing. It stops Eldritch from banishing. It stops the Tenji engine from banishing. It stops Eva and Drytron, which isn't as big, but it's still one less negate you need to deal with. And better yet, this is also an investment into your future. The reason is simple. Right now, again, Lancia has some very strong applications. But in the future, certain cards that are gonna come out are gonna shift the meta so much that Lancia will become even better. One example of this is Sword Soul. Sword Soul splashes in the Tenji engine, and so like I just said earlier, being able to stop them from banishing does help you a lot. But most importantly, however, is when we get the Brave token support. The Water Enchantress can be stopped from banishing, and most importantly even, the Brave token is insane in PK. And stopping PK from banishing, that's just game over. So again, super solid now, but even better in the future. Next on number 4, we have Droll and Logbird. Now, Droll and Logbird is a pretty weird one. In certain matchups, you use it and it does nothing. It does absolutely nothing for you. However, in other matchups, you use it and you end the opponent's turn right then and there. It is a double or nothing kind of card. Either it's kind of like a brick in your hand, or it completely wins you the game. I feel we're currently in a meta where Droll and Logbird is pretty good. It stops Sky Striker from adding more after their first draw, versus Invoked if they magical meltdown and then you Droll after that. Now they can't Alistair into Invocation. You can stop PK from adding. You can stop Lyrilusk from adding more Lyrilusks after Bird Call. After it Desires, you can stop Virtual World from adding more with Lulu and the other card. You can stop Drytron from adding a billion cards to their hand to stop all of those negates from even popping off in the first place. If Eldritch uses Extrav, you can technically use Droll to stop their cursed Eldland, though this one is getting a little less relevant because we see a lot of people cutting their Eldlands to either 2 or even 0, so you know, maybe that becomes less worth it, but the other examples I've given you should still make this a solid consideration for your deck right now. And once again, once we get that whole Brave token thing, but that will probably be a while, you can also stop a lot of stuff from happening with Droll that way. On number 3, we have Infinite Impermanence. Now, Infinite Impermanence is basically a jack of all trades. It stops monster effects. So it doesn't say, oh, it's because of this thing you did, oh, you did this thing, I can stop that. No, no, no. Any monster effect. It will just stop it. So whenever you're not sure about a given hand trap choice, you're like, oh, does the meta need this? Does the meta need that? You know, there's so many different decks. I really want to be able to stop kind of everything. Infinite Impermanence is probably going to be the choice for you. Beyond that, it can also be set as a regular trap card, and this can also come up sometimes. You can Imperm Alistair, you can Imperm Prankit's Butler, you can Imperm Sky Striker Kagari, you can Imperm some other crazy negate monster. If you've ever struggled with some powerful monster, whether it's the end boss or the starter or an extender, Imperm can probably help you out. Now, one other little line of text on this card that a lot of people don't really use to its full advantage is the fact that it can also negate spells and traps. So in certain matchups, it can be super impactful if you're able to set the Imperm and then use that spell or trap negation. A good example of this would be, for example, Eldritch with their skill drain. I really notice that advanced players use Imperm so much better than non-advanced players, and beyond that, really advanced players will then properly play around the option of an Imperm against those advanced players. So there's like a lot of depth to this card that not everyone really captures, but even if you're still not used to that, and I myself honestly am not either, it's still a super valuable card that can help you in many situations. So if you're not sure, if you're like, is this a Lancia meta? Is this a Droll meta? Do these cards work here? Infinite Impermanence will probably be still solid regardless. Next up, on number 2, we have Ash Blossom. Now, Ash Blossom, once again, is super versatile. So if you're not sure, this is often a really good inclusion. The reason is a lot of decks use adding from deck in some way or milling from deck. Using any kind of interaction with the deck is just a super typical Yu-Gi-Oh thing. You see your opponent use a Pot of Desires or a Pot of Extravagance, ash it. They were gonna go plus and now they're instead going minus. That's a huge deal. You're basically changing a 2-card card advantage just with the 1 ash, and they already had to pay the cost before even getting any value. There's honestly so many things Ash stops, it's impossible to even go over all of them, but I think the most important thing it also stops is the most powerful hand trap in the game, but more on that later. In the TCG, if you only have room for 1 hand trap, it's probably gonna be Ash. And in the OCG or Master Duel, if you can only run 6 hand traps, let Ash be the second one. However, the first one is gonna be number 1 on this list, and that is of course Maxi. Maxi is the most broken hand trap ever created. You can argue whether it should come back to 3 in the TCG, or it should stay at 0, or some people are it should go to 2 or 1, or whatever you're thinking of. You can argue about that all you want. But what we can all agree on is the fact that this is the most impactful and powerful hand trap ever made. A lot of combo players will simply stop comboing when you activate Maxi. It's that simple, because even if they keep comboing, you're gonna draw so many damn cards of this that you can probably out their board anyway. If you only have room for 3 hand traps in your deck, let it be Maxi. There are very, very, very few matchups where Maxi isn't an incredible hand trap. Like I've said before on this channel, the only risk in crafting this hand trap is if they somehow were to ban it in some way in Master Duel, or they added a new ban list or a new format, and for some reason you do not get your crafting material back. There is no confirmation on whether you would or wouldn't get it back. I don't know. As far as I'm aware, they never made any official statements on this. It would be logical if you got your crafting material back, but we don't know. Maybe they just add the TCG format and a lot of people migrate to that, but they say, oh, you don't need to dismantle it because the Master Duel format is still there. I don't know what they will do, of course. But so that is the only potential risk in this card. Still, I felt safe enough to craft it. I think this card is so impactful, it's gonna be used across the entire ladder. But yes, I also understand that slight risk. This is really the only hand trap that defines a meta. The major difference between TCG and OCG, no matter what's on those ban lists, is the fact that Maxi is legal there and isn't legal here. Maxi simply slows the game down so tremendously because pure hardcore combo decks tend to be too scared to play through it. Now next for some honorable mentions, because obviously the 5 hand traps I just showed you aren't the only ones, and there are really valid strong other ones that can be good for your deck or for a given meta depending on the circumstances. So number 1 in our honorable mentions is Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler is kind of a jack of all trades, like the infinite impermanence we spoke of before. However, it is often seen as weaker. It only works in our opponent's main phase. It turns on triple tactics talents where Imperm does not. It gets stopped by a Utopic Draco where Imperm does not. There's a few reasons why often Imperm is seen as better. However, there are certain decks that really want to be running Effect Veiler over Imperm. And the best example here is Sky Striker. The reason is pretty simple. Sky Striker uses a lot of spells. And there is one Link monster in particular, Selene, that really gets super strong when you have spells in your graveyard. Because what you're basically looking to do is make a Crystron Halka Fibrax that then summons your Effect Veiler out, which you couldn't do if you weren't running it. Then you link those two off into Selene. Selene sees that you have enough spells in the graveyard, summons back that Effect Veiler, and now you link off the Effect Veiler and the Selene into an access code Talker or some other incredible link for. So that play you could never do if you were running Impermanence instead, but you can if you're running the Veiler. Again though, this is not something for every deck. You do need to have the critical mass of spells in the graveyard for this play to work. Next on the honorable mentions is Nibiru. Now Nibiru is a very controversial hand trap pretty often. When it first came out, a lot of people assumed that combo would basically be dead. Do 5 summons, here's a stupid token, get rid of all your cards. That was very painful for a lot of decks. With that being said, over time a lot of people learned to play around it, started building around it as well, but it's still a very impactful hand trap. And another really important part about Nibiru is that Maxi by itself doesn't win the game all the time. You still need to combine it with something to break your opponent's board. Maxi can draw you into answers, but when you don't play any answers, the Maxi did essentially nothing. This is often referred to as the Maxi challenge, where someone will keep on comboing off, letting you draw all those cards, to just hope that you don't actually play the answers to out their combo board. This is why you want to combine Maxi with something like Forbidden Droplets, Dark Ruler No More, or Nibiru. These cards are ideal for breaking big combo boards. Finally, on our honorable mentions, we have the Gamma Driver package. Now, if you don't know what this is, you would essentially play 3 Gamma and 1 Driver. This would make it so very often you draw a Gamma and not a Driver, and this is basically one of the most impactful hand traps in the game. The only problem is that it only works when you don't have monsters, meaning this often translates into when you're going second. For this reason, it's often a hand trap that's only side decked in. However, in Master Duel we don't have a side deck, it's just best of 1. So if your deck has the room and really needs an unfair, overpowered hand trap, the Gamma might be for you. Sometimes metas get so unfair that the only way to stop their unfairness is by getting stronger and stronger hand traps. Even if they are more high rolly, like the Gamma, you know, you're running 1 more bad card, only works really well going second, it might just be your only out, and then people start running it. Next, I wanted to mention 2 more hand traps that will probably get better in the future. First of all, we have Ghost Ogre, a pretty old hand trap, but still pretty good. It's just, in my opinion, not quite at the power level as the other ones I've mentioned before. But the second one, and this might be more important, is the DD Crow. This is one of the oldest hand traps ever, and for the longest time this wasn't even played because you didn't really have decks that were impacted that badly by it. However, now, DD Crow just gets better and better depending on if the format shifts to graveyard-based strategies. So if we get some of those strong graveyard-based decks in the near future, like the PK Brave stuff, it might be really good to get those DD Crows ready. With that being said, that was the list. I hope you found this very, very interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.